All right, so we're about to get started here. So we have a little bit of a tradition for all you new folks to Startup Grind out there, is that when we welcome our extra special guest tonight, I need everybody to get up and stand up and cheer as loud as they can, as if, I don't know, the White Sox won the World Series, or maybe the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup or something like that. So, all right, everybody, let's give it up for Bryan Johnson!
That was like The Price is Right.
Yeah, I know it can be a little unnerving, but, and Bryan, I know you and I both had a very long day today.
We did.
So we were at the New Venture Challenge all day since like 8:30 this morning. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to start out with kind of a unique question that I think really can give us some insight into who you are and your background and such. So let's go way back, long before Braintree and OS Fund and what have you. Tell us where you grew up, the kinds of things you were doing and thinking, and if there was ever a moment when you kind of exhibited, some sort of entrepreneurial spirit, I guess.
Okay. So I grew up in Springville, Utah, this small town, and we were always up to no good, always. But I remember one time, I think I was in 7th grade, these cliques started forming in school. People started to associate with like-minded people. You had like the jocks and the nerds and the stoners, and everyone kind of associated with these groups. And I didn't like that. I liked to dance around between the different groups because everyone had such a different perspective on life, and I liked that. And so I did this scrappy big data analysis where I looked at all the groups and I evaluated the power structures within each group, the influence each person had, because within each group you had people who would allow other people in the group that had the permission to do that. And so then I mapped out a strategy to go out and basically befriend everyone in every group because I wanted to have friends across all these different groups. And I did this all through high school, and I think I was friends with everyone in the whole school. And I just loved doing it. I didn't really have anything special to offer. I wasn't clever or funny or witty. I still wore clothing my mom made me or we bought at Goodwill. And it's just, I really enjoyed befriending people. And it's funny because actually I did something similar with Braintree. I had this problem where I needed customers, but I didn't have any money. And that's a hard problem to solve. And so I knew that engineers were my primary customers. And so I went out and did some research, and I evaluated the social characteristics of engineers, of the various programming languages like Java, .NET, Python, and I analyzed whether the social propensity to interact and be chatty in the community. And I found that Ruby on Rails was a very chatty, connected social community. And so I figured that if I went and got the leaders in that community to use Braintree, that the others would then follow. And so we got 37 signals here locally and a few others. And it's true that we basically built the company on word of mouth based upon this community development. But I've always enjoyed befriending people and always enjoyed that approach.
That's a great story. Incredible. So fast forward just a little bit, and I know you spent some time in Ecuador. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that experience and then what you sort of walked away with outside of that experience.
Yeah, it changed my life. I lived there for 2 years, and I lived among people shackled in extreme poverty, mud floors, mud walls, and I guess it really got to me in a number of ways. One is the smallest trials in life could potentially set a person back for life. Small sicknesses or whatever else that we just normally solve here in the States. And I didn't think people really didn't have a good shot at life to give it their best and see what they could do. And I came back to the States, and I'll never forget, I got off the plane and walked in, this place just seemed like a kingdom, it was unreal. I couldn't believe what we lived in. And I made the decision there that I would devote my life to trying to build a better world to improve people's lives. And so I determined that I would become an entrepreneur, retire by 30, and then spend my time trying to improve other people's lives.
That's awesome. So let's start with your first sort of entree into entrepreneurship. Tell us about it. How did it go?
Well, so I needed a cell phone, but I didn't have any money. Again, I guess that's kind of the story of my life. So I looked up in the yellow pages, and I found this guy who was willing to meet me at the mall to sell me a cell phone. He gave it to me for free. And when the transaction was complete, he said, hey, like, you seem like you're smart and energetic. Why don't you come work for me? I'll pay you $40 per activation. And it was like perfect timing because I never understood why I would trade 60 minutes of my time for $8.75. Like, to me, it just seemed like such an unfair trade. I wanted to control how much money I made every hour, whether it be zero or 1,000. And so he said $40 per activation. I thought, 2 phones per hour, $80 per hour. All right, I can make 40 grand a year. And I thought, this is perfect. I'll put myself through school. And so I did that for 2 days. And then I was on the porch selling this phone to this woman. She had 3 screaming kids. And I had this thought that just forever changed my life. I thought, wait a second. If I'm selling phones for him, why can't others sell phones for me?
Right.
Yeah, so I ran home and I worked nonstop for 2 days and I set up my company. And I sold cell phones through other people on campus, and I paid my way through school with that business.
Wow, that's awesome. So did you keep doing that after college, or where did it
No,
go
I
from
paid my
there?
way through college, and then I did that for probably about a year and a half, but it just wasn't big enough. Like, if I wanted to retire at 30 with a large sum of money,
That's right.
I needed something much bigger. And so
Yeah.
I set my sights on something larger.
Much, much bigger.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. Where was the inspiration? Where did it come from, and all of that?
Well, I mean, so I was feeling good about this entrepreneurial endeavor, probably feeling a bit overconfident, and I started talking to 3 other co-founders about this voice over IP company. The idea that you could replace do a phone call over the internet instead of over telephone lines was this amazingly cool idea. And so we started a company to do just that, but for large corporations. And we raised $420,000, and we built a product, and we got customers and revenue. And we went out for a second round of funding, and 9/11 had happened, and it soured it. But I mean, in reality, I think we did everything wrong. I think we had the wrong team, the wrong product, the wrong timing. Like, it was a poor decision making all around.
So let's talk about that. So you went into that situation, and you had 3 other co-founders.
Yeah.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. And then so you started to build out a team. And where did it break down?
We didn't have the technical expertise. We didn't understand the market. I mean, basically, I would summarize it that I wasn't scratching my own itch. I didn't understand it well enough to do it. And none of us did.
Yeah.
We just saw the opportunity and went after that.
Yeah. So out of that, what did you do next?
So I wanted to take a break. My older brother, who was my partner in that, convinced me to do a real estate development with another guy who we've been talking to. And so he was this real estate developer. He said, hey, I've got all this great real estate. Come raise money for me, and we'll develop this stuff together. We thought, great. Like, we'll raise money for physical assets instead of this internet thing. And we spent 2 years putting together this massive mixed-use, $50 million mixed-use project. And it was really challenging working with the city and, like, designing the whole thing. And
Where was this, by the way?
this was in Utah.
Oh, it was. Okay.
And a year and a half in, we were all broke. We couldn't pay, and we couldn't pay our bills. We had borrowed money from everyone we knew. We tapped those sources out, and I had a child at home, and I couldn't pay my bills. And so I started applying for jobs everywhere, and I tried to construct my resume so I didn't look like I was an entrepreneur,
Right.
but no one bought it. I mean, no one would even give me the time of day. I couldn't get an interview. And then I saw on the paper one day, there was this list of the 50 richest people in Utah, and I thought, they'll get it. So I wrote this email, and I contacted their assistants. I said, would you please just forward this to them? And in the email I said, look, I'm young, I'm smart, I'm ambitious, I want to build these companies, I just need some income in between. I'll do anything you want me to do, I'll be your right-hand man, just let me come work for you. And no one responded. And so I was totally desperate at that point. And I found this job ad on monster.com that they said, come sell credit card processing door to door. And it's like the requirement was if you could fog a mirror, you could come sell. You would march up and down the street, and you'd go into a business and say like, hey, I can help you with your credit card processing. And the moment you walked in the door, the way I dressed, they could tell I was a salesperson. Like, oh, like the last thing I need is someone else pestering me. And then I said, credit card processing, like, get out. Like, I hate this stuff. I've been taken advantage of for the past 10 years. Everyone does this. And but I figured out this strategy where all I needed was about 45 seconds to connect. And so I'd go in, I'd say, I could read the body language and see the eyes roll. And I'd say, all right, I will give you $100 for 3 minutes of your time. If you don't process credit cards with me, you get a $100 bill.
Wow.
And they'd say, all right, like, what could you possibly say, right, in 3
Yeah.
minutes? And so I'd open my pitch book, and I'd just walk through page and page, and just basically say, here's how the industry works, here's who the players are, here's what I do. I had no differentiation. My product was exactly the same as what they had. And I sold them on trust, transparency, and honesty.
Yeah.
And I said, like, this is the last time you ever have to change. You're with someone you trust, your statements are clean and understandable. And I probably closed, I don't know, 60 to 65%, some high number of the people I
Yeah.
sat down with. I became the company's #1 salesperson. I broke all their sales records with this simple formula. And I discovered this wonderfully broken industry of payments.
Wow, that's incredible. How many times did you pay out $100?
I never did.
Really?
I mean, a lot of people said no, but they think they felt so bad.
Yeah.
I was probably in this disheveled state, and they
Yeah.
probably felt bad for me and let me off the hook.
So from that experience, did it directly lead into Braintree, or was there anything else that came along?
I moved to Chicago to pursue an MBA,
Yeah.
and then I started Braintree
Yeah.
shortly after.
And you were in the New Venture Challenge.
Yes, that's right.
And by the way, Bryan won in 2007.
Thank you.
So at that point in time, was it just you, or did you have a team around you, or
Just me.
just you? And did you find other co-founders or other folks that were helping you out at UFC?
No, this was. I understood the industry. I knew what I wanted to do, and it was clear. And so I felt like
Yeah.
I could take it on.
So, you win the New Venture Challenge, you get a little bit of dough in your pocket, I guess, a little bit of attention. Where do you go from there? How did you get things started?
So I started Braintree, and I went back to Utah, where I had customers from selling credit card processing. I went back to my 10 best customers, and I said, I've started a company, why don't you switch over to me? And I think I got 9 or so to say yes.
Wow.
And it made me $6,000, $6,200 a month, which was enough to get an office, get some part-time
And you
help.
had kids, right, at this point?
Yeah,
didn't you?
yeah, 2.
2.
Yeah, staying up all night with the kids and then working all day. It was tough. And but then we got a big break. OpenTable showed up, and they said, we've got 11,000 restaurants around the world, and we need to keep our credit card data secure. And we did a deal with them where it's a $1.5 million contract over 3 years, and overnight we became a software shop that we could build a product to provide to other merchants.
You're a little bit unusual because I think you actually bootstrapped it
Yeah.
for a period of time. Were you ever approached by anyone from an investment standpoint? And how did you manage that?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped for almost 5 years.
Wow.
And we had enormous investor interest because most of our customers were technology companies, and their their investors would ask them who they use for payments, and they would say Braintree, and we love them. And so, yeah, I mean, on a daily basis, I'd hear from someone. We had a lot of interest. But the thing about Braintree that, there's a few Braintrees here that was our secret sauce is that we sincerely desired to build an exceptional company. Like, we really did. And that was our passion. And from the get-go, the goals were to, 1, that we would be the best payments provider for developers. 2, that we'd be the best place that anyone ever worked. And 3, that our customers would write us love letters. We didn't set any goals on revenue, no goals on user growth, anything. It's just that. And we wanted to build an exceptional company. And then we built the culture from the ground up based on principles. And everyone had a say, everyone had a contribution. And it wasn't like this top-down thing. And so we did weekly town halls. We talked about all the things. I could feel, oftentimes in the week as we were building, I could feel the pressure grow within the company, right?
Yeah.
I figured, like, first thing that people always have a pebble in their shoe, always, right? There's always something bothering them. And oftentimes it's very easy to address just by acknowledging it existed. And but we did a lot of group problem solving. But I think the secret sauce was we had exceptional doers who really cared about building something exceptional. Our customers felt it, we felt it internally, And that's really what drove us to our success.
So backing up a little bit, tell us about what was the problem that you guys were actually solving? And going back to the secret sauce, that was the solution? Was your secret sauce?
So if you're a business that sells things online, so versus like in store, there were very few good technology options. So if you're an engineer, you want to code payments into your system, there were very few good technology solutions in the marketplace. Most were about 5, 6, 7, 8 years behind, which was a big time in technology. And so we built really great software, and we coupled up support with that really was unrivaled in the industry. And so we acquired customers, some of the best technology companies in the world: Uber, Airbnb, GitHub, 37 Signals. I mean, down the line, we had thousands of some of the best merchants in the whole world.
And at that point in time, maybe not 37 Signals, but the rest of those folks were still very young, right? I mean, they were on the verge of exploding, but how much did having early adopters like that play into your business strategy and your growth?
We wanted the best companies in the world to work with us. And so we did the word of mouth. We had a lot of companies come to us, but we also did selective outbound, trying to target those who we thought would be great companies. So even like Living Social, and when they were rising up, we had them as well. But we would fire customers. I remember this one, we would. Wow. It just, like, happiness inside of Braintree was so important that when someone came to work. So I guess like the critical experience I had on this was that I always wanted people at Braintree to be happy, but people being happy and thrilled about work was a hard thing, because if I came to you and said, how do you feel about things, it's very hard to express an honest opinion, right? We don't want to have conflict, and it's hard to say what we really think. And so I always was looking for honest feedback on what people thought about Braintree. And one time we were at the Christmas party, and we were in the buffet line, and there was the significant other of one of my engineers, and I said, how's it going? Like, how's so-and-so enjoying the company? I think he'd been on for like 4 or 5 months. And she said, honestly, like, it's really good. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And she said, well, like, he comes home, he's happy, he's engaged, he feels good about his coworkers, he loves what he's building. And before, like, he was in a bad mood and he's grumpy. He didn't like his coworkers and he didn't like his boss, and they're always changing stuff. And I thought, like, yes, like, this is the data source, because I wanted the raw data on what people really thought. And so when I found, like, when you go home, you say what you really think, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so it was all about a quest to finding the raw data that was relevant on how people really felt, because I wanted people at Braintree to go home being thrilled and happy about what they were building and how they're doing it.
So you guys, you grew very quickly at that point, right?
So
how do you sort of scale that? You know, if you have 10, 15, 20, and all of a sudden 100 people, how do you scale that kind of, and I don't like this expression, but corporate culture, environment? How do you do that?
Through a whole bunch of thrashing about. I mean, it's a hard process, and I've talked to so many entrepreneurs over the years, and like these critical points between like 5 employees and 15 and 30 and 100 and 250, and every company goes through these growing pains, and it's funny how many common things happen at those critical break points. But I think the key thing is, if you really care about that and people know you care, you can weather the storms that inherently come with the change and disruption of how you structure a company.
Yeah. So what year are we in right now? So this is like 2009-ish, 10-ish?
Yeah.
Where you're going through this high growth phase. So at that point, I know you've got sort of this master plan behind you. Was this falling into your master plan? And were there any, big hurdles or obstacles, I guess, that you ran up against?
It was just all the normal stuff, I think, as a company, on how many people to hire, when to hire, how to accommodate the growth. Every time we hired a new space, I mean, Stephanie's here, we got a new office space, and we had to move, we moved in because we outgrew it already. Yeah. So just typical stuff like that, we had people in the hallways doing conference calls. The bathroom was 4 people lined up all the time. And we had all of our interviews in a closet that was way too small. All the fun things that accompany a startup.
Tell us about the people that you put around you at that point. I mean, your team. Yeah. How did you find them?
So a lot of word of mouth through our team, but we also experimented with a lot of job postings. I like Ernest Shackleton quite a bit, the explorer who tried to cross the Antarctic coast to coast. And we copied his job ad where we'd write on the very top, please do not apply if. And we would make these statements trying to offend people. And we wanted to be really explicit. And what we wanted to happen was we wanted the right person to like jump out of their seat and say, yes, like this is the company I want to work for. And so we did a lot of things like that. We were very thoughtful about who we hired and who we kept on the team. We didn't have a safety net. So if someone wasn't a fit or they needed more training, it wasn't like we could just say like, okay, go join this group and like figure it out until you come back. Like you're out. Like, I'm sorry, we don't have any other choice. And so we just expected people to be exceptional. And I told them when they joined that I only had two metrics. One is that your employees tell me that you're exceptional and that the customers tell me you're exceptional. If those two things happen, we're good. But people were expected to solve their own problems, pursue their own initiatives. They had free reign to do really whatever they wanted to. We were a very collaborative group, and people were empowered to do what they thought was best to build the company.
Who do you think, at that point in time, who was your key hire? Who do you think was your most important hire and why?
We were a great team.
Yeah.
The whole.
No single person.
No, I mean, there were so many times where I couldn't believe how much effort people put into building the company. It was amazing. Staying there all night, multiple nights in a row, working all day, every day. It was amazing. And people have moved on from Braintree over the years. And the thing I consistently hear from them is that they've yet to find the passion and the drive and the purpose they felt. I mean, I think we were unique in what we did and how we did it.
Were you starting to feel like the writing was on the wall? Like this was growing so quickly and you were going to be acquired soon or something big was going to happen?
Yeah, so when we took funding for the first time, almost 5 years in, I wrote a blog post and I said that I thought that payments was at a moment in time like Blockbuster or Netflix, where things were changing so dramatically that billion-dollar companies would become zero and zero companies would become worth billions. And that we were at that inflection point, and that Braintree had as good a shot as anyone at becoming a significant player in the payments industry.
So tell us about that sort of process of getting acquired, and what did it feel like? What was the experience?
It's such a mixed thing, and no one can prepare you for it. I had friends who told me how traumatic it would be, and you don't know until it happens. But like there's probably a lot of founders in here, but when you pour your heart and soul into something that you care so deeply about, and on one side it's great to have a positive event, but the other side it's your baby, and so it's really, really challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. So at that sort of departure, what did you do then? Like, did you just go off somewhere and sort of take it in, or what happened?
Well, so, I mean, I'd been thinking about this for a decade. At the age of 21, I decided that I wanted to try to better people's lives. And I looked around at stuff you find in college, like the UN model nations, and looking at doing work in Africa and things that we all kind of see. But nothing really spoke to me at that time. And I was worried that I might spend a decade of life looking for something, and that I would find myself at the age of 30 still looking, but not without assets or freedom of time. And so that's why I decided to become an entrepreneur. But during the course of building companies over all those years, I spent an enormous amount of time reading about the future. And what became abundantly apparent to me is that we live in this remarkable time. Like it's uniquely exciting, and that's primarily because we have these awesome powers of creation. And specifically, if you think about, for example, like computer software, virtual reality, genomics, biology, virtual reality, we can literally program and build any kind of world we can imagine. And that's untrue for any generation that's ever existed. So I mean, I think of, for example, like Leonardo da Vinci, where he had his famous sketchbooks where he would draw a flying machine, but yet he couldn't build it. He didn't have the tools to do so. And today, there's very few things we can imagine, but we can't build, and let alone build in a day or a week or a month. And so if you look at the Ark of Humanity, I mean, for example, you even take biology, that just like we can program computer software, we're now being able to program biology. The world runs on biology. You and I are biology. And if we have the ability to program that, just like we do zeros and ones, there's so many possibilities. And so as I thought about that, and I thought about where the human species was going, to me, the most important thing I could have done with my time was working on these tools of creation, the things like that actually will design and build our world in the coming decades.
So that directly leads into OS Fund.
Yeah.
So tell us about that and elaborate more on your inspiration and where are you headed?
Yeah, so once I sold Braintree, I called some of my friends and I said, hey, who do you know who's like the most inspirational person you know, who's working on the hardest possible problem? And I would get two or three names, and then I'd go to those people and I would speak with them, and then I'd get 2 or 3 names from them. And over like 4 to 6 months, I probably spoke to maybe 200 or 300 people, and I got a really good feeling for what was going on out there. And one gentleman I met, Craig Venter, who is he sequenced the first human genome, and then also he did the first synthetic organism, which means that he designed code in a computer and booted up a cell, demonstrating that we can create life. Right, the biology is programmable. And he was working on this company called Human Longevity, where he said, if we can take the human genome and couple that up with other data, genotype and phenotype information, and then apply advanced machine learning, we might be able to revolutionize medicine and radically extend life to 120 or more and cure age-related diseases. And I had breakfast with him in La Jolla, and within 10 minutes I set him in. And so I was the first big money in that company, and joined the board. It's been amazing working with him for the past year and a half. And it's true with the other entrepreneurs I've invested in as well, in AI and space. But really, we're starting to formulate these good investment theses on these various tools. But of all the companies, so I guess I'll give you a couple examples of other companies we've invested in. One company, Gingko Bioworks, so biology can be programmed for specific outcomes. For example, you can create sweeteners and flavors and do things in the lab that you'd otherwise happen in nature. But they're building it up in a platform basis where we can literally, like you would computer software to do with biology, and we can slowly take on more complex challenges like antibiotic resistance and carbon capture. Another company is trying to mine an asteroid. And so if we are to become a multiplanetary species, having economic incentives to get there would be really helpful, rather than just trying to beg the government to do it. Right. And so on asteroids, you have two precious materials. One is precious metals that we use here on Earth, and two is water. You can extract the hydrogen for fuel, so you can create a 7-Eleven in space. And so it's a audacious goal, and they're building a viable company until they get to that long range. Another company, Mattternet, which is doing autonomous vehicles. So if you were to build out the same infrastructure in Africa that we have in the United States, it would take $4 trillion in 23 years. And so instead of doing that, you can leapfrog that through autonomous vehicles. And so I think that the autonomous vehicles will do for transportation what the mobile phone did, the smartphone did for communications. It will revolutionize the world of transportation, both in the developed world and the developing world. And I guess one other example, Hampton Creek, maybe you've seen their stuff, Just Mayo, where they take plant-based proteins and then they replace traditional foods like the egg. So annually we produce like 1.9 trillion eggs, which requires a lot of your environmental impact, right? Water and land and stuff like that. And if you can use plant-based proteins, it's healthier, it's more friendly in the environment, it's more more affordable. And so, yeah, these companies, if any one of them are successful, they would have an amazing impact on humanity.
What's really the end game, though? I mean, is it financial, or is it just world changing, or what's your end game?
So certainly it'd be helpful to make money, because if I can make money, then I could reinvest it and do more. Yeah. So the question that I can't stop thinking about is, we can create any world we can imagine. And the tools we have to create that are growing in power. So we create our tools and our tools create us. So with this, what kind of world are we going to build? It's the biggest question we face, because we literally have that power and we didn't have it before.
Right.
And so I want to invest in companies that, specifically in entrepreneurs who I feel are future literate, who understand the trajectory of humanity and understand generally what's at play. I mean, technology is neutral, right? It can be used for both good and bad. Right. So I don't say that they're after necessarily good things, because it's subjective, but they're building good technology.
Do you think some of these things, I think about like longevity as an example, can also create problems as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep. It's,
So,
go ahead.
well, and mining asteroids. I mean, these are huge endeavors.
Yep.
World-changing,
Yep.
revolutionary, but they could also kind of work in a negative way, right?
I agree. It's one of the most fascinating things that we've been talking about. So if I were to pose the question generally and say, do you like living? The response will probably be yes. Do you want to live tomorrow? Yes. Do you want to live Saturday? Well, yeah. Sunday? Yeah. Do you want to live until you're 120? Right? Like, there may be some disagreement, right? People may say, well, we're already taxing the earth too much, and having people live that long would be too much. Or I think 70 years of age is adequate for a life. But the point is, if you take these basic questions about existence, is living long good or bad, we quickly disagree. And so as we build out technologies like this genomics-based company that wants to radically extend life, you're right. It's not an easy thing to say it's just good, because we differ radically in our opinions. And so as we contemplate our powers of creation plus our need to reconcile what we build, because what you build affects me and what I build affects you, we have to rely upon what I like to call the operating systems of reconciliation. So for example, like our governance structures reconciles our differences. They help us solve the things we can't agree upon. We do that as individuals, as groups, as families, as communities, but as a society, we rely upon our governance systems and our reconciliation systems to help us resolve these big conflicts. And so part of the OS Fund, what we're focusing on increasingly will be these operating systems of governance and and reconciliation, because they're critically important as we build the technology out, determining how we build the world.
You mentioned something earlier when we were talking that you spend your time in San Francisco, New York, and DC.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why DC, speaking of governance, inevitably these questions, these huge, massive issues will become, I don't want to say a moral issue, but some sort of political issue that we'll have to decide upon?
For sure. I mean, if you think about it, maybe it's an oversimplification, but when the founding fathers of America came and they drafted the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and whatnot, the basic question they're answering is, how do we cooperate? Like, we're here in the same space. We have to get along and not kill each other. So, how do we cooperate? And so the entire construct is how we cooperate as society. And if you look at that system as a way for us to govern ourselves and reconcile our differences, right, it's certainly challenged right now to keep up with the pace of technological development and answer these really big questions that we're creating with our development.
Do you worry that sort of political hurdles will be put in front of you as you create these things?
Oh, yeah, it's inevitable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's appropriate, right, that there is some friction in our system to have this debate on what we think is appropriate for society.
And so some of these, are these going to happen in your lifetime?
For sure.
Even traveling to asteroids?
So it's mining an asteroid is not that far out. Technically we can do it. We need to solve some robotic challenges and whatnot, but we're not too far off.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's technically feasible.
So before we open it up to questions and so on, is there sort of a message that you want to send out to everybody and share? You've had this sort of very diverse experiences and background, and now you're headed off into changing the world.
Yeah.
So is there a common theme that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, so I guess the one thing I try to keep top of mind is in my office I have this picture. I hired this graffiti artist, and on the left side is Gandalf the Grey, and on the right side is Harry Potter. And Gandalf the Grey has his staff, and Harry Potter has his wand. And they have this explosion in the middle, and there's this book that's open and blank pages and a pen. And then in graffiti it says "Dream" across the top. And this has been the guiding philosophy of my life, is that I believe that humans can choose to author our lives, that we can choose to do whatever we want, that we don't need to take life default options, that we don't need to do what others have done. And I wanted this one to resonate with my children. So when they walk in and they see this, that the point is that J.K. Rowling and J.R. Tolkien created worlds out of nothing, out of words that we've all inhabited through books and movies. But they literally created something, right, through the tool of text. And now we do it through movies and stuff like that, through pixels, right? Tools of communication and understanding. And as we share an interest in entrepreneurship, but I think that's why entrepreneurship is so beautiful, is that we get to create any company we want, right? We get to create the reason for its existence. We get to create the rules of the game and who we hire and how we hire them and who can stay and who can't stay, right? It's beautiful. And so I just would encourage everyone that as we all contemplate life to try to question the assumptions that we live by and the default options that are given to us and expand our thinking to wonder what we really can do with our lives.
That's awesome. All right, let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. So I wrote a children's book called Code 7, and the subtitle is Cracking the Code for an Epic Life. And I'm writing a second children's book right now, but I'm interested in starting a children's movement, and we're working on it right now, trying to figure out how to do it. But I think there's 4 questions I want to answer. If I think of the sequence of like what my children do in life, one is, who do they aspire to be like? So the hero identification. Then 2, what skills do they acquire, which then determines which endeavors they pursue, which then determines which ecosystems they work in. And so I see it as a sequence of events in our lives that once we get to a certain spot where at my age I have certain skill sets and I'm in certain ecosystems that I can work with. And so I think that it's the operating systems of hero admiration, right, of skill attainment, of ecosystems, all that kind of stuff. And so I agree with you, and I hope that we can have a positive impact on what people aspire to and then what they actually do with their lives. But certainly an area that I think is important that we address. Yeah, winging it. Right, I mean, like, just in time, if we have a problem, we try to figure it out, but I don't know if there's any formula. We identify the problem and we'd hustle to fix it. And I think the key was we had the right people on the team at Braintree who, when the problem arose, they were there. And I trusted them. I knew they would solve it. I knew they would, no matter what was required, they would do it. And so I'd probably say it came back to establishing who we were, why we existed, and then establishing the culture that supported that, and then hiring the right people to subscribe. I mean, it's the same thing with Ernest Shackleton. His job posting, he said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, safe return doubtful, honor recognition in case of success. And I think he had something like, I don't know, 700,000 applicants, and he chose 20 some odd, 23. And not a single person died. But if you read his biography, you get to these points where you think, it couldn't possibly get worse. Like, no way. And then it gets worse. And then it gets worse and worse at every point. And I think that's true for entrepreneurship. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I felt like it was treading water and then getting dunked, every 20 minutes. And then trying to keep afloat. And you have to plan long term while that's happening. But if you have the right people on your team, you can survive. But I think if you don't, you'll stay underwater. I did a really poor job at this. I got married young and I had kids. And by the time I worked all day every day and then I went home with the kids, I just was done. And I didn't maintain really any friendships. I was very insular in building my company and very heads down. And I didn't have a good network of people to go to. And so I'd say that was really something I regret because, and all the emotional and whatever turmoil I was going through, I kept to myself because I owned the energy around me, both at the company and in the home. And I had all this pent up stuff. And so now when I talk to founders, I want the real deal, right? Like, give it to me straight. And I encourage them to call me, right? In your darkest, worst moments, I want you to call me, right? And tell me how bad life stinks and how everything is just awful and how you don't want to continue anymore in the company. And so I wish I would have done a better job early on establishing those kinds of relationships. Even just venting, right, is extremely therapeutic. But going to someone and having them give you a few words of wisdom or insight would have been supremely helpful. So I try not to do what I wish that I would have had when I was going through that. I always come back to build good tech. So I was on a panel last month at a Collision conference, and the panel discussion was doing good with tech. And I wanted to reframe the discussion of you do good with tech by building good tech. So for example, airplanes are good technology, but they're also used to fly into buildings and they create pollution. So every technology can be used for both good and bad, but I'd say to improve the world, to bring about good outcomes, it's building good technology. I think it's the best thing anybody could do at their time. Yeah, quite a few. I mean, I like material science, building new forms of materials. And so, yeah, anything that builds upon tools of creation, we're interested in. Yeah, so I would change the frame a little bit and say the challenge is not risk. That is, most scientists approach problems thinking, for example, like I'm going to get a grant, a $5 million grant, and I'm going to study HIV. And I have this hypothesis on a way to cure HIV, and I'm going to test it, and then my hypothesis is going to be right or wrong, but I'll know in 5 years after I spend $5 million. But the problem with that model is the binary outcome, right? It's a really high risk. It's like put your money on red or black. And so what I've been pursuing with my companies is I want them to come up with business models to say, okay, if I'm going to solve HIV, I'm going to put together a business model where along my path of discovery, I'm going to make money. And so, for example, human longevity, their goal is to radically extend healthy human life. But along the way, they can make money by sequencing human genomes for Genentech and other big pharmaceutical companies. And so they radically extend the runway of discovery. So whereas before they maybe could have tested 10 hypotheses, now they can test thousands and thousands to become a viable company, so they can extend their time for discovery. And so the key, I think, is the business model that allows these scientists sufficient time to test enough hypotheses to come across that major breakthrough. Because money is the scarcest resource for them, right? I mean, next to time in terms of testing the hypotheses. So that's been our focus in trying to find companies that are self-sustainable along the path of discovery, so they have time to do it.
And that sort of allows them, like in the tech world, to pivot. So if you come upon something and then you head down that path, as opposed to your original path.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. If you look at the pipeline of innovation in the United States, like the internet and space and all the things with the internet that have come about over the past couple of decades, they've all come through the pipeline of government, academic, right, studies, and then it commercializes at that very point. So we've been doing a lot of studies to find out where in the pipeline are these specific technologies. Has the government incubated it for decades? Has it been in academia for decades? Is it really ready for commercialization? And so you saw, for example, in the past 2 decades with synthetic biology and green tech, right, venture capitalists had a pretty rough time trying to bring about commercial solutions in those areas. And so it's a great point, and it's always a question of where they're at in that life cycle. I do think that biology is there. I think that we're at the point where it can be commercialized and make a lot of money.
Specifically genomics or in general?
Yeah, I mean, so I think genomics too. So I mean, genomics was incubated by the government as well, right, with the whole human genome. But the key on genomics is it now costs $1,000 to sequence a genome. We now have the computational capacity to actually process information, and we have the advanced machine learning to figure stuff out. So the gentleman leading the machine learning team at Human Longevity, Franz Ock, he did Google Translate. So just converting language to another language, and so we're doing the same thing in the genome. So it's just a different data set. But I think those 3 things make breakthroughs in genomics finally capable of happening when it couldn't happen even 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, so it's a great question. If I give money away, I don't have it anymore, right? And that ends my ability to do something with it. If I can invest the money and it grows, I can do more with it. And so someone said to me recently, they said, the greatest form of philanthropy is capitalism. So that's not my opinion. I'm still thinking about it, but I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I get this question all the time, and like obviously a lot of people are requesting money, but it's a really important question for me. That money currently is a tool for me to use to try to have a positive impact on the world, and if I can increase the power of that tool, it's very helpful.
That.
A lot of people said a lot of things to me. I did have 2 jobs. So I had a job selling credit card processing, and then when I came to Chicago, I took a job at Sears. I worked there for 8 months. And it was interesting. I think I had like 3 different bosses over an 8-month period of time. I was bossless for a month. I don't think I did a single thing valuable in that company when I was there. And I felt bad. I felt bad because I took money from the company. I didn't add any value. And after that experience, I literally felt like I would rather be poor and hungry than I would work in an environment where I couldn't add value. Right. My working hypothesis is that if you want to do good, right, and good is subjective, then the best way to do that is to build good tech. And so if you're trying to bring clean water to people, or if you're trying to get them adequate nutrition, or if even basic things like that, right, shelter, that building good technology is the fastest and most efficient way at helping people, and broadly. So the companies I've invested in, for example, genomics and biology, these are not things that will be only available to the rich or the privileged, right? It'll be democratized, and it'll be diffused broadly to all of society. And so I very much believe that the technologies we do create need to be broadly distributed. We need to raise everyone up, that it cannot be a case where only a selective group of people get access to it.
Awesome. All right, folks, let's give it up for Bryan Johnson. I think Bryan will be able to stick around for a couple more minutes, but thanks everybody for coming out to Startup Grind. We'll have another event next month back at Pivotal Labs in the Merchandise Mart. So thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.